Welcome to today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. I'm joined by Robert Coon of Impact Management Group, Dr. Jay Barth of Hendrix College. Two folks that love to crawl through poll numbers with us. And we've got some Democratic polling from the 2nd Congressional District, which is very, very interesting. We haven't had a chance to do that. I want to begin with the fact how difficult it was for us to find a universe of Democratic voters because there haven't been any major contested primaries other than Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders in 2016. How tough was it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, you know, in 2014, there were a lot of uncontested primaries. 2012, the presidential primary was late in the game, and so there wasn't much action there. But this year we do see some action, especially in that congressional race that's getting a lot of attention.
And if you go to 2010, Robert, you're really getting somebody that hadn't voted in 8 years.
That's right.
They're not really a likely Democratic voter.
That's right. You go deeper to find new people, but if they haven't been engaged in either of the other three, then what are you really gaining in doing that?
Yeah. Let's talk about the demographics in this poll before we dive into some of the results. There's some interesting stuff. We did wait a little bit on age in this poll, but other than that, we kind of left it where it was. High female turnout, about 4 points higher than the 2016 presidential primary, but I'm not so sure that that's not where this district is at this point in time. Did you guys have that same sentiment?
Yeah, it may be a little high in terms of the gender ratios with more women than may turn out by May 22nd, but I think it is going to be a very heavily skewed female electorate. We also know that it is a very heavily skewed Pulaski County electorate, that there just aren't a lot of Democratic voters out in the suburban and rural counties. That number was not too far off at all from the last time there was a contested in 2016 when you look at the primaries.
I think the women being as high as they are is somewhat indicative of kind of what we're seeing in polling generally. You know, I think they're more patient, more willing to sit there and answer the questions. I think sometimes men are quick to hang up, to be quite honest. I do think that's a good point about, you know, Pulaski being kind of the heavy anchor of this district for Democrats, which also plays into some of the issues and things that we tested where, you know, they don't necessarily see eye to eye with the Democrats in other parts of the district. There are smaller pockets of them, but there are some differences in how they view the issues.
Let's take the governor's race because we will have a debate on this very set on Wednesday night. Here between Leticia Sanders, Jared Henderson, undecided, the big winner, leader in that race right now at 59%. Robert, I'll come to you first. Is Jared Henderson, has he missed an opportunity?
I think so. I think that's a scary place to be if you're him. I mean, I think you were kind of the planned candidate that was in it the whole time, rolling into filing day, kind of with everybody's support from the party. Unexpected last-minute kind of challenger, but hasn't seemed to have done anything really to get his name ID up here. Both candidates from Central Arkansas, so you would think their name ID would be better here than other places. And so if they're at 24% and 17%-ish roughly here, it's probably even worse everywhere else. So that's a precarious situation. I'd call that a total toss-up.
Yeah, I do think it is very got to be nerve-wracking for the Henderson campaign. I think they've really been looking at the fall. That made some sense on one level, but where he has no name recognition himself. I mean, he's Jared Henderson, not a known figure. It really does create a dangerous situation because, I mean, I think that she is doing better with African American voters.
There's a lot of primaries in African-American districts as well.
So I think that's nerve-wracking. So I think this is a tricky thing. Now, I think it's important to recognize Henderson does better with older voters. He does better with establishment voters. And so these are the folks who unquestionably are going to turn out. We have another subset of voters, to go back to the initial question, where we're not positive exactly who's going to turn out. But I think the folks who are tried and true voters, he's more solid with that electorate.
If I got to pick older voters or younger voters, I'm taking older voters every time. So.
And that's not just because you're getting older either. That's
right.
because that's who's reliable in terms of voter turnout there. All right, let's contrast the Donald Trump approval number among Democrats versus Republicans. If we ever needed to borrow from Charles Dickens, it was a tale of two cities or a tale of two states. 86% approval for President Trump among Republicans, 83% disapproval among Democrats. Not surprised.
Right. And again, you know, I think we all have to say the caveat. This is a second district again and again and again, and so it's not a statewide poll. There's a little bit of apples and oranges comparison. That said, I think that while this district may skew a little more anti-Trump than Democratic voters statewide, Donald Trump is the consummate polarizing figure, and party is the divider there, and the determinant moving forward in terms of how his standing is going to be among independent voters. They're locked in on the R&D side.
Yeah.
I really thought the key takeaway from the Trump numbers, I mean, the overall was not really surprising, but even though it was smaller universes in those rural counties, they definitely see it a little bit differently, where you even saw some 20s, 30% support or approve of Donald Trump. I think, it is the second district, those are smaller universes, but if you kind of extrapolate that concept across the state, there is some Democratic support for Donald Trump. And I think any candidate, whether they're running in second congressional district or statewide, if it's just bash Trump all day, all night long, I think there's going to be some conservative Democrats that don't agree with that.
We're not seeing a lot of that though in any of the primary races here. Right. I really thought, and that may be the reason why. Yeah, no, I agree. Right. All right, let's talk about Arkansas Works. Big support among Democrats here. Not a surprise again in this, but 70% support, 13 opposed, 17% don't know. We did see a plurality with Republican voters in this. It seems to me that that Arkansas Works is here to stay, Robert.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty solid across Democrats, and it's been fairly consistently above 50 for Republicans. So, I mean, I think that most of the voters are in tune with kind of what it is, and that they support the policy. I did think it was a little interesting that it seemed like the opposition was a little bit higher among African American voters for Arkansas Works. So, not exactly sure what that's about.
Could be the work requirement.
Yeah,
could be part of that. There's been a lot of publicity around that.
I think since the beginning of this program, really, Democrats have been the base of support, a real bedrock of support. I don't think, may be wrong, but I don't think a Democratic legislator has voted against any of the incarnations of Arkansas Works in any of those votes.
Robert's up there for all those votes. He
I think that, and so that is shown in this in this kind of mass level analysis as well. I mean, Democrats are all in on Medicaid expansion, whatever its name, and independents have been more wary of it, but I think it'll be interesting when we look at this question with a general electorate sample in the fall, kind of where the overall electorate is.
Lastly, let's talk gun regulations. Should there be more, less, or no change to gun regulations? Obviously, very different levels of returns here among Democrats. 78% say it should be more regulated. Where we saw some divisions among Republicans there in that poll that we asked the same question to 2 weeks ago, we see a lot more solidarity on the Democratic front. Not a surprise.
Not a surprise. I do think this is probably an area where the second district numbers may be a little different than statewide numbers on the Democratic side. I mean,
you think it'd be a little different in the first and the fourth on gun
a little
issues?
bit extra among Democrats. Kind of the urban base. I mean, really, if you look at the most urban of counties in the state, Pulaski, Washington, and Benton, those are the places where kind of the most concern about guns being out of control. We see some grassroots movements in those counties. Moms Demand Action, some of those groups. I think this is very clear that that's an issue that and we are seeing it in some of these state legislative races on the Democratic side, these primary battles, where folks are really trying to get there in terms of saying they will stand up on further deregulation of guns.
We're going to see it in one general election up in Fayetteville proper, I think
we're already seeing it.
The same thing kind of applied to this question too, is there is kind of this divide between the urban and suburban communities. Even if you throw kind of Saline into that, it's more like Pulaski maybe than your real traditional kind of rural communities, Conway County and Perry County and things like that, which may be more indicative of how Democrats feel in other areas, like you said, in the first and the fourth. It's certainly a strong number for those that want to see more regulated. I think, when you account for, the small amount of Republicans even that are interested in more regulated, I think, it would be interesting to see what kind of coalitions could be built there. I think it's a tough place to go, but it's not like it's not the reverse of the Donald Trump. They're not polar opposites. There is some give and take to be had on issues like that.
And a high female turnout in this one, and we did see some gender gap on that side, on the Republican side as well. All right, it's interesting stuff. You can keep up with all of our polling data between Talk Business and Politics, Hendrix College, Impact Management joining us in this round as well. All of that is at talkbusiness.net. Jay, Robert, thank you both very much.
Thanks, Roby.
All
Thanks.
right, that's all for today's program. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.